Hello friends, Nick from NLB Solutions here, and today we are continuing with the next topic from our VMware vSphere series, and this is the topic of configuring and managing virtual storage. And we're going to use the iSCSI storage method as the main topic of this video because the lab itself, it does not explain any specifics in deep of what different storages you can use. They just want you to connect an iSCSI storage to your VMware hosts. Before we continue, I just want to apologize. I am a bit sick, so this time you will hear a bit more cotton in mouth, like a comment that was left in my channel. They say that when I speak, I sound like I have cotton in my mouth. So yeah, deal with that. And we are just going to start with the lab by providing you with more information what I'm going to use. So I have my virtual environment, and just want to specify I'm using an entirely virtual environment for this. And the first server, which is a Windows server, I use as a domain controller for authentication purposes. The second server is my storage server, where I've configured the iSCSI targets, and I'm going to show you how we can configure an iSCSI target on the Windows server. And I have my two ESXi hosts that are powered on and waiting to be utilized, and my vCenter server that I'm going to use to configure the iSCSI storage configurations for the hosts. So to start with the actual, if you want to learn additional things about the configuration, you can start by looking a bit more deep into what different storage technologies you can utilize with VMware. And to give you a bit of a point, so you can try to look what is the difference between directly attached storage, between fiber channel over Ethernet, iSCSI, NAS storage, and how you can utilize them in VMware and in general. Unfortunately, if I decide to try to describe everything point by point, it will be a bit overwhelming and a lot of people will click away from the video. So I wanted to keep it as short as possible and just to show you what is the practice point of things. And meanwhile, while we configure things, I'll try to provide you with a bit more information so we can hit the 10 minutes mark of the video, like PewDiePie in his videos. No, of course, I'm joking. You can see that my videos are unfortunately 30 minutes long. So one of the first important things that you want to know and you need to know about iSCSI storage is it has 2 points of communication between them. You have a target to which the actual device connects, and you have an initiator. So if I can present this on a practical way, the server that I'm using, which is the Windows server for storage, is my target, and all of the iSCSI disks are located on this target. And on the other hand, the initiator will be configured to be my two ESXi hosts. So the hosts will initiate a connection to the target. That way they will be presented with the actual LUNs, which is the logical unit number. So right now you might be asking yourself, what exactly is logical unit number? So if I can provide you a bit more information from the practice point of view, you can imagine, for example, that you have a storage. This is pretty much a server, let's say a server with multiple hardware disks attached to it. This disk can be grouped into a single virtual disk, or let's say multiple virtual disks. It's up to you. These virtual disks can be configured in a specific RAID level, for example, and within these disks you can create volumes. So let's say that we have 2 disks. I can group these disks into a single virtual disk, which is going to be RAID level 1 for redundancy. And within this virtual disk, I can create 2 volumes, volume 1 and volume 2. And these volumes can be mapped to the actual iSCSI initiators or the ESXi hosts, let's say, and presented, and this is actually what LUN, or logical unit number, stands for, to be on the practice point of view. Of course, if there is someone with deeper storage technical knowledge, they can correct me in the comments, but let's continue with actual configuration of this lab and how we can achieve the target and initiator. So right away you can see that I already have two iSCSI virtual disks that I've configured, and they are connected to my iSCSI, to my ESXi hosts, and only to my ESXi host 1. So I've left the ESXi host 2 so we can configure it together, so you can see what exactly is the actual process. And of course there are different methods of, depending on if you're using a hardware iSCSI configuration or a software. In my case it's entirely going to be a software one. So first I'm just going to create another iSCSI disk so you can see how this is done. I've done it in the past, but yeah, you can check it if you want. But I'm going to select the volume on my Windows machine that I want this iSCSI disk to be residing on, and I'm going to name the disk. So let me see how I named the other ones. So this is going to be iSCSI VMFS Data Store 3. Later I'm going to explain what is the difference between and what are the file systems that are known by VMware in general, but now let's concentrate on this. So I'm going to say 5 GB so we can use it as a test one. Usually you have three options in here. Usually it's always a good idea, if you are going to use the iSCSI disk, to connect it to an ESXi host, to be a fixed size, so it can be provisioned directly without it expanding. In my case I only have 28 GB, so I'm just going to use the dynamically expanding method just for test. And straight away you can see that I have option to select different initiators to this target. So I can select the new iSCSI target, and I will be presented to create a target name, and then I will be presented with the option to add the initiator IDs. So let me show you before, let's say, test. I'm not going to finish the wizard, but I'm going to show you how it's done. So here I have the option to enter the actual, if I know the actual initiators that are going to connect to this target, I can present them in here. And this is going to create, let's say, a bond between the target and the initiator. So if and when the initiator tries to connect to this target, the target will say, yes, you are allowed to connect to this storage. On the other hand, if you don't have a mapping for the initiator, and if the initiator tries to connect, it will be denied. So what I did here is, instead of using the IQN, or this right here, and I'll show you where you can see it from the hosts, I used the IP addresses. So I specified the IP addresses that are going to be configured for my initiators, and you can see them right here. So I'm going to use this target and initiator once again, and if I click create, I will be presented with another iSCSI virtual disk. So I'm going to close the window, and you can see that at the moment my data store 3 is not connected. I suspect that when I refresh the actual settings on my ESXi 01, it will automatically connect it, but nevertheless, let's leave it like that for now. So I'm going to minimize this and switch to my ESXi hosts, where we can configure the other settings and connect the ESXi storage. So the first thing that we'll need to do before configuring the actual iSCSI storage is we need to create a VM kernel network adapter. It's because it needs to create a point where the ESXi host is going to connect to the actual target, which is my Windows server. So I'm going to go to the configure tab, and you can see that on my ESXi host 02 I does not have any different virtual switches than the default ones. I have the management network with a VM kernel port and the VM network, which does not have any virtual machines connected to it. Of course, what you can do is you can connect the iSCSI storage to this VM kernel port, which is not a good idea. What VMware suggests is to try and separate the management network from the actual storage. And if I can tell you a real life example, what happened with a thing that I saw with the configuration I saw, they were using the management network to vMotion virtual machines around the hosts. And what happened is, because vMotion is really really filling up the bandwidth channel, the actual ESXi hosts, because it's using the same management network, the actual ESXi host was losing connectivity from the vCenter server, which was causing the ESXi host to isolate itself, and which was causing the virtual machines to the vCenter to not be able to detect the ESXi, and all the virtual machines to fail over, or at least they try to fail over, which was a problem. So what you can do is you can try to split the storage network, the vMotion network, from the management network, and that way you will be good to go. What I've configured on my ESXi 1 host is I've configured another virtual switch, which I'm going to configure here as well. But you can use the a single virtual switch and just separate it with different VM kernel ports and assign different network cards if that's possible, of course. So I'm going to use to create a VM kernel port network adapter for a new switch, and I'm going to assign vmnic2, which is going to be active. Of course, in real life scenario, you will want to configure more than one network adapter, so you can have redundancy and increase bandwidth. But in my case, for the testing purposes, I'm just going to select one. This is going to, the network label is going to be called iSCSI. And I'm not going to select any service to be available over this one. For the IP address, I'm going to configure it using my predefined IP address. This is going to be the 3.0. The default gateway, I'm just going to override that, but in my case it's not really going to be needed, but depending on the scenario you might want to override it or not. So I'm going to click finish, and after a few seconds I will see that I have my vSwitch 1, which is the iSCSI with the iSCSI VM kernel port. Now that we have our VM kernel port up and ready, we're going to switch to the storage adapters on the left side. And by default, the ESXi is not configured for software iSCSI. So what you need to do is you will need to click on the top left corner and add the iSCSI, the software iSCSI adapter. This is a one-time only event, and I'm not sure if you're going to be able to revert from it at all. So I left this without the option to create one, so I can show you how it's done. So a new software will be added to the list after section, complete the configuration. Okay, so the iSCSI adapter will appear on the bottom, the software adapter, and there you can see what is the actual identifier and or the IQN of the initiator that is going to connect to the target. So you can see that this is the IQN that I can add to my target, or in my case I've used the VM kernel port, which is this IP address. On the bottom you can see that we have different adapter details, and we are going to configure them right now. So you can see that the adapter status is currently enabled, and you can disable that if you want. On the other hand, we have under general the information about the iSCSI name, which we can click edit and modify if needed. But if you need to add this to the target, you just copy this one and add it to the target as an initiator. So on the bottom you can see that we have authentication, and you can even configure authentication to which is the chat method, which can be unidirectional or bidirectional, and depending on if you want to secure the storage traffic, you can select one of these options. For me, in my case, I don't want to create this. I'm just going to use the default. The first thing that we'll need to do next is create the network port binding for the iSCSI storage. And I'm going to use the iSCSI VM kernel port that I've pre-configured. And if I click on it, I'll see that I have all the information combined into a single place related to the actual VM kernel port and the virtual switch that it is part of. So I'm going to click OK. And after a few seconds, my port will appear. And the message will say that I made configuration changes I will need to rescan. I can rescan from the top, and from here I can scan for new storage devices or VMFS volumes. And after the actual rescan, you will see a small icon saying that at the moment this port bind is not used. So if I go to targets, paths, or devices, there isn't anything currently mapped. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to go to the targets and select from the actual two methods of discovery. The first method, which is dynamic discovery, or also known as send targets discovery, will say each time the initiator contacts the specified iSCSI server or the target, it sends the send targets request to the server, and the target server will respond by supplying a list of available targets to the initiator. So depending on which, if we go in here, let me close that, depending on which targets I've configured in here to be allowed, the initiator to be allowed to be connected to, the dynamic discovery will return this list to the actual initiator. On the other hand, the static discovery will not perform any discovery at all. Instead, the initiator knows in advance all the targets that it will contact and uses the IP addresses to or domain names to communicate to them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a static discovery. I'm going to specify the IP address of my target server. The port below is the default iSCSI port, which is 3260, and I'm going to connect on it. And if I click OK, it will say that there are incorrect or missing values below. And this is the iSCSI target name. So, do you remember where exactly we can pick up the iSCSI target name? Of course, from the actual Windows server. So this is going to be our target name, and we are going to use that. So let me see if I'll be able to copy that from here. Not exactly. Let me scroll down a bit and try to copy the IQN. Yep, this should be it. Let me try with the actual IQN. So if I paste the actual IQN in here, well, of course I'm not able to. Let me try that again. Okay, if we configured everything properly, the static discovery should appear right here, and we're going to make another scan for storage devices and VMFS volumes. This time, when we look at the actual paths, when the rescan is complete, we should have few paths connected to my ESXi host. At the moment we have 3, which are the 3 iSCSI disks that I've pre-configured. And if I go to data stores, let me see if that would appear in here. Yep, I have my data store 01 and data store 02. So now I have successfully connected my ESXi host to my target storage, iSCSI target storage. Now that we've configured the iSCSI storage to be connected to my 2 ESXi hosts, you can imagine and you can realize actually that this is only the tip of the iceberg of related to the topic of storages and virtual storages in general. And what I really recommend you to do is, if you want to dig deep into VMware, go to the VMware website, try to see how they represent the virtual storages, how they connect to the actual vSphere environment, and how you can configure, because this of course is just a basic overview. On the next video we are going to speak about managing the VMFS data stores, or how you can configure and how you can create data stores, what you can do with them, a bit more about what exactly is the data store, and we're going to use the newly iSCSI disk that I've created to create a new data store, resize it and delete it later, so you can see how this is done as well. If of course you have any questions, or if you are not able to configure the iSCSI storage, leave a comment in the comment section below, and I would really appreciate the help if you subscribe to the channel, if you like the videos, share them, because this is really helping NLB Solutions to move forward and expand the brand in general. This was Nick from NLB Solutions. I hope that this video has been informative. See you in the next one.